a matter of personal perspective for a lot of the families in our community, whether they've had good experiences or not. And I think a lot of them maybe that haven't had good experiences are relatively quiet about that, and they continue to do the things to make their lives better. And maybe that's a trait of the Hispanic culture, is that I'm not going to worry so much about what you think of me. I'm going to focus on myself and my immediate family and making our lives better and doing the things that I can education-wise and, buying a house or getting ahead or doing it, whatever it might be, and just worrying about myself. Keep my head down and move forward, work hard kind of things.
Hello again, everyone. This is Ethan Daly, and welcome to the GigRoots podcast. GigRoots tells the story of grassroots economics in America. Each episode, we speak with the people who are working toward community transformation at the grassroots level. During this third season, we've partnered with Welcoming America to help share the stories of foreign-born peoples who have come to call America home. Welcoming America is leading a national movement of cultivating inclusive communities. They work with nonprofits and local governments, providing tools and resources to help make cities places where everyone can belong. Through the network, we've spoken with local leaders and business owners actively contributing to strengthening their communities. Find out more at welcomingamerica.org. In Sioux City, Iowa, race relations have been able to maintain a kind of quiet equilibrium for many years, but thanks to current social movements, a new level of wokeness is sweeping through this Midwestern town. Thanks to shifting demographics, the tone of conversation around race and immigration is slowly changing. Some have done well to maintain the status quo up until now, but local business owners like Jose Gonzalez are speaking out against the disconnect between American ingenuity and the current wave of anti-immigrant sentiment.
So how can you say that, they're sending their worst? Is there people that shouldn't be here that are? Yeah, I agree. But let's not get confused. We have some of the worst people here in America already. But worst people, we have the worst mass killers in America, the mass rapists, the, people that just go out and shoot people just because they want to. So how do you figure that we're getting their worst from other countries? I don't understand that.
We talk with Erica DeLeon and Jose Gonzalez about moving Sioux City forward regardless of racism, pandemics, or any other chaotic diversions. That's what's coming up on the GigRoots podcast. Let's get started. As we all know, change comes slowly. The nation's growing impatience in dealing with the pandemic exacerbates the issue. Minorities and immigrants, already wearied from the generations-long battle for racial justice, were pushed to the brink upon seeing the news of George Floyd. Waves of protests and rioting cascaded from one major city to the next. Meanwhile, in small Midwest towns, much of life continued on as it always had. Only now, after many years of keeping the status quo, there were enough people of a different skin tone to stand up and take notice. Sioux City, Iowa is one of those small Midwestern towns. It borders Nebraska to the west, where a sparse rural landscape is interrupted occasionally by highway passersby. One doesn't expect to find much in the way of protest, at least not of the St. Paul, Minnesota, or Chicago variety, yet it still emerges, as is the case in other towns nearby. For example, 2 hours away in Fort Dodge, the town saw perhaps its first big protest of any kind in recent memory. And about 40 minutes north in Vermilion, South Dakota, they had yet another protest. Erica DeLeon is the director for OneSiouxLand, where she works to help everyone manage the changes one day at a time. Her husband, who is Hispanic, represents one such component of the region's shifting demographics. The surrounding metro area has grown by nearly 9% over the past 30 years, where those of Hispanic origin comprise roughly 7% of the total population. Sioux City sits on the Mississippi River at the intersection of three different states, Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. and DeLeon gets more done at the grassroots level, given this unique geography.
Our communities across the tri-state area through Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. And the Iowa side of Sioux City is the biggest community. And their population, though, is maybe around 18% non-English speaking, and a little bit less than that of foreign-born population. So we have, still a significant number, but yet on the Nebraska side, where it's a smaller community, the foreign-born population is more like 30%, and the foreign language speaking population is closer to half, or even a little bit more now. So while the numbers are smaller on the Nebraska side, they're definitely it's kind of like saturation rate, I guess. There's definitely, as a percentage of the community, more people who are from other communities as far as newcomers and such. And that's the area that I work with, is primarily with newcomer populations, immigrants, and refugees. So not as much with our Black and, and our Native American populations, but sometimes some of the initiatives that we do are with everyone in mind and trying to get more of a voice for all folks who are trying to start businesses and get engaged in welcoming work. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I hear you kind of talking back and forth about, sort of Iowa and Nebraska, because you're right on the border.
Yep.
It's between the two. So, I want to just touch on that a little bit more. We talked about this before, but kind of tell me, what does it look like to work with sort of multiple government agencies as you're trying to promote sort of this welcoming environment for foreign-born peoples? What are the challenges to that process of just trying to work across government and state lines?
It's interesting because they all have their challenges, but they all have their advantages too. So while there might be more resources financially on the Iowa side because it's a bigger community, in Nebraska, you get more boots on the ground. So you can get the city administrators and council members and mayors to be at meetings more regularly because it's a smaller community and there's more, probably stronger relationships, and they aren't torn and pulled in as many different directions. But they're resource poor as far as financial funding to make some of the initiatives move forward. So I'm kind of that bridge between a lot of that, where a lot of the resources and the funding that I'm able to get, I'm able to braid with different sources. And if something is strictly limited to one side of the river, then there's another counterbalance to that where we can still do the same initiative on the other side, just using either different funding, people, resources, organizations, things like that. And there is a lot of, as far as organizations and even with the city governments, there's a lot of coordination across state lines on some projects. This is an area, though, that's relatively new to be one that's working across state lines. So it's not so much the city governments that get involved in welcoming work in the tri-state area. It's really more the nonprofits that are doing a lot of the work and leading a lot of the initiatives. So it's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, I see the benefits on all sides, because we also have South Dakota in our tri-state area. The South Dakota part of Sioux City is very small, but definitely growing. That's where my kids go to school, and the diversity has been increasing quite a bit over the last couple of years. So it's really exciting to see they're building more affordable housing and more multifamily complexes up here. No real businesses being opened yet by newcomers, but that'll happen, as people start to move here more and get more acclimated. So, and we work a little bit with the Economic Development Department on this side, because there are a couple of larger businesses on the South Dakota side that are trying to make sure that they're listening to the needs of those that are working for them. So, yeah, interesting, but not always in a bad way. Sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out which way it's going to work and pushing it forward with that angle than trying to make it work where it isn't.
Right. And I can imagine just some challenges inherent to trying to achieve some level of consensus anyway.
Yeah, it happens.
But, you talked about some exciting changes in the region. I'm also just curious, we all know that, how COVID has kind of affected things, but what just talk about some of the economic challenges in the region, even prior to the pandemic. I mean, what are jobs looking like? What is business growth looking like? What have you seen?
Actually, in our Siouxland region, our unemployment was about 2.5%, and we were maybe 7 out of the past 10 years named one of the top or the top growing mid-sized community. I can't think of the name of it right now. I'll have to get that to you, but there's some national publication that looks at rate of economic development and schools, quality of life, affordability of homes, things like that, and then names communities, rates communities based on that. And we've had such significant economic growth and development in the past, over the past decade, that we've been fortunate enough to be on that list quite a bit. And a lot of that development has been in the industrial side. We had a $300 million pork plant open up a couple of years ago that employees is at target full employment would be about 2,000 people. So that was a big boost. Once they got going, it took a little while to fill that many jobs, of course, with the unemployment that low. But and then some of the other areas have been maybe less as far as new jobs, but still creating a lot of economic development and a lot of opportunities. And even in the wake of economic development, we have a lot more opportunities for families coming up. We have like sports complexes and arenas and cultural and arts and those types of things popping up. So there are more opportunities for families to want to be here that have been developing. We have a really strong young adult population that's coming up in the community that's trying to get a lot more of those projects going and make people want to live and stay here, which is great. And we just need to get our immigrant minority populations engaged in that work as well, so that their voices are being heard when those needs are coming forward.
Yeah, certainly. One of your initiatives, Growing City Connections, working with over 100 different various community stakeholders within that, looking at the data and the trends there. What sort of input are you trying to seek from the folks that are part of that initiative?
Oh, everything. That initiative actually started probably at least 15 or so years ago. It's transformed in the last maybe 8 to 10 years and really become a sort of that place where people go to get connections and find information. It started out as focused in Nebraska on the children and families in Nebraska and making sure that organizations were connected to each other to make sure families had the resources they needed to thrive. And now it's tri-state, and it's grown beyond just families to also looking at individuals that don't have children and making sure they're connected as well. And then just this last year, we added a data component to that. There was an initiative that's been in the community about 30 years to collect data from not just local community, but state, national, and all sorts of trends in data affecting positive youth development. And that initiative has also expanded to go beyond just youth development, but looking at all of the factors that affect quality of life in the community. And so that data comes to these growing community connections meetings, and people look at the data. We sort of identify, of course, it's really focused on what the topic might be. We identify what concerns us with that data or what makes us think we need to keep pushing that particular indicator forward because it's effective. And then there are probably about 100 people at each meeting, but there's probably about 600 people that are engaged in the work of growing community connections overall. Just each month, they average about 100 at those meetings. So with that many voices representing the diversity of nonprofits, city government, businesses, retired volunteers, even, there's even sometimes college kids there, sometimes with that many diverse voices, the great thing is we get a lot of ideas, we get a lot of connections and opportunities to move initiatives and projects forward that impact that data. So the goal there is really to use data and use our community resources to make things better, but again, to improve the data so that we know that we can actually prove that what we're doing is effective.
Well, it sounds like when you have, a lot of different voices at the table across lines of age and ethnicity and even places in life, that sort of gathering is wonderful. But what sort of tensions arise, or what sort of tensions have arisen even in thinking about, trying to bring in more ethnic immigrants to the region? What sort of tensions have arisen with that?
And not specifically through growing community connections. This is the least tension group you'll ever be part of. They are
Well, that's good.
It's one of those kumbaya kind of organizations, but everybody loves it. It's so effective the way that the information and the connections are moving forward. Some of the tensions, I think, are that a lot of the economic development is adding additional industry, factory jobs, things like that. So bringing in a lot more folks. The jobs themselves are low skilled. The people are not. That's what's interesting. We have people who are doctors and MBA graduates and college educated adults working the lines at a lot of our food production facilities because they're new to the country. They might not have sufficient English. They might not, in some cases, might not have proper educational or immigration documentation to be able to do the things that they want, might not be able to transfer their credits or their experience to be able to do the job that they want. Or it might be a job that's just not in demand here that they did in their other country. So there's a lot of things keeping people from economically getting where they need to be. But I think one of the big challenges that you see from the community as a whole, from longtime residents, is that why are we continuing to develop and bring all these low-skilled jobs in? Why aren't we looking more at cybersecurity and other sorts of IT and getting more jobs in those sorts of areas where we can either provide the training? We have 4-year colleges now, really 4, access to 4 different 4-year colleges and universities that actually are located in the community or through community colleges having access to those degrees locally. So significant opportunities to train people for higher skilled jobs. And then also through those community colleges, opportunities for technical skilled jobs and things like that. So I think that when you listen to the city government's talk, they want to bring more of a focus on the training and the education and the economic development and bring that more in line, because it doesn't always quite line up with what everybody wants. So, I mean, that's one of the things. The thing that to me seems really short-sighted about that is the first generation of immigrants, yes, they're filling a lot of the production jobs. Their kids are the doctors and the city council members and the insurance agents, the social workers, the teachers, everything. My husband's a perfect example. His parents worked those jobs when they first came to and built up and eventually owned businesses. But he now is a hospitalist and works in the hospitals, just like so many of his other second generation counterparts.
Where is his family from?
Mexico. And so to me, it feels short-sighted to say, why aren't we training all of these people as soon as they get to this country to be in these high impact jobs? And like, well, if we would take care of them and make them feel welcome and train their kids, then we're likely to not only see the population increase, but also have that opportunity to grow those, I guess, white collar jobs is what they'd be called, but have more opportunity to develop that in that economic development realm to get down that path too. So the focus just hasn't been there over the last 100 years. We've had production plants as the backbone of this community since the early 1900s. So.
Yeah. So for you and your husband, and then, other folks that you guys come in contact with, even thinking about this across generational lines, sort of how things are shifting and just in terms of where we're at in this country, I'm just curious, what do conversations look for you guys around the table when you start talking about, race and class and other things in this country? What do those conversations look like?
They're different when it's just us around the table than when we're out in public.
For sure.
There've been a lot of changes. His family was some of the first Hispanic families in this region. And so they've watched for 40 years as that's changed and transformed and what it looks like. Some things have stayed the same and some things have gotten better. I think it's maybe a matter of personal perspective for a lot of the families in our community, whether they've had good experiences or not. And I think a lot of them maybe that haven't had good experiences are relatively quiet about that, and they continue to do the things to make their lives better. And maybe that's a trait of the Hispanic culture, is that I'm not going to worry so much about what you think of me. I'm going to focus on myself and my immediate family and making our lives better and doing the things that I can education-wise and, buying a house or getting ahead or doing it, whatever it might be, and just worrying about myself. Keep my head down and move forward, work hard kind of thing. So you don't hear, and even when a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests started around the country, ours were very peaceful and they were all planned in conjunction with our local police departments. Anything that happened was so minor, and it was usually just a couple of random kids who went outside the normal protesting times. But it was successful. We tried to use some of those opportunities to do things like voter education and registration and census outreach during the summer, to try to make it impactful and say, protesting is one way to share your opinion and raise your voice, but the other way is to vote. And of course, to be counted in the census and things like that. So, and that was at the request. They just asked me to help, but that was at the request of the leaders of our Black community who were planning these protests. Is we need to make this meaningful. We just don't want people in the streets with signs. We want them doing something. We want them to make an impact. So to me, that was really powerful that they didn't just do what they felt a lot of other communities were doing. They really wanted to make it be worthwhile and make an impact on especially the young people that were coming. So that was good.
Certainly. Through her work, Erica coordinates efforts to serve underrepresented populations as a means of both social change as well as just practically spurring entrepreneurship and economic development. But that underrepresentation is a big issue. However, people like Jose Gonzalez provide an ideal for what's possible. Gonzalez is deeply embedded and invested in the community as an entrepreneur, a soccer coach, and a city council member. He even ran in 2018 against the incumbent mayor, Rod Cox, citing the need for greater Hispanic representation as a core issue. He would have become the city's first ever mayor of Latino origin. As a minority, Gonzalez says he doesn't personally deal that often with issues of race. However, he struggles to understand the irrational logic behind anti-immigrant sentiment. He hears some people argue that immigrants come and steal jobs from native-born citizens, yet those supposedly stolen jobs provide long hours for little pay, an untenable scenario for many Americans but enticing to newcomers.
I am originally from California, Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, born in Encino, California. Obviously come from Mexican parents, immigrants that came here a long time ago.
When did your parents come to the U.S.?
1967.
And in your conversations with your parents, I'm just curious, what did they tell you it was like coming to America?
It's going to sound cliche, but the American dream. Everything will be better in America is what I've always been told. Ever since I was young, a lot of opportunity, country where you can be what you want to be.
How would you describe the American dream for you?
Truly the dream. I'm not going to sit here and say it hasn't been, because it has. Had a lot of ups. I had a lot of downs, more downs than ups, but it's getting better. It's truly amazing, at least for us, to come where we come from and be where we're at now.
You talk about ups and downs. What are the downs? What have those been like? Can you just kind of describe what some of those downs experiences have been?
I wish that, I guess I don't wish, but we all focus a lot like on race, racial, all that stuff going on in the world now. But I can't really say that I've been exposed to that kind of hatred in a big fashion. I'm aware that it exists, but I've had more favorable people of all colors be good to us. It's just truly, we're truly blessed that we could say that and speak like that on an issue like that. But we've had a lot of our downs of messy bone, our struggles, our own struggles. Coming from a very low-income family. To the point where we didn't really get to go to McDonald's until we were, a lot older. If we did go, we would have to share specifically 3 Big Macs and 3 fries and 3 pops, cut in half so we can all eat. Those were our downs. I was not a very good person growing up. Got into a lot of trouble with drugs, gangs, and stuff like that. So, to been able to turn that around and have great support from family, that's truly been a blessing to us, to me at least.
How has business been for you lately?
Lately, we've had great support here from the community. Of course, with all this pandemic and stuff, it's been a little tough. Especially my second restaurant that we've opened, that was been challenging since this will be our second year that we're open, and then this hits us, so it's been challenging. But the community here has been great to us. We've stayed afloat. We've been able to pay bills, pay our employees. So I can't truly say that it's been really bad for us. It hasn't. We've been able to keep the doors open. So we're happy about that.
You know, you said before that you feel as though, in your personal experience, you haven't experienced as much direct racism towards you personally, if I'm understanding right. Um, I'm curious. So, in your opinion, is race a big issue? Is it a big problem in America now?
Um, from what I see in the media and all over social media, it really seems to be. I'm not saying that it isn't. That's not the case. Obviously, there has to be some truth to that. But I can't speak on that personally. Um, I've always approached all kinds of people with a lot of respect and have received the same respect back. Have I seen it personally at one point or another? Of course. There has been times where you're kind of confused. Is this being racial, or is it just being mean? So I can't really tell you. Yeah, I've been um, kicked out of a place because of the color of my color of skin, or I've been neglected from somewhere or something just because of my name. Um, I can't really say that I felt that way.
In your opinion, when you come to America, what does it take in order to succeed?
Well, be persistent, man. Be persistent at believing what you do. Um, Obviously, have good support from your family is very important. Not just your immediate family, meaning wife, kids, but your extended family, sisters, parents. Um, I honestly say that my family and myself, I am what I am because of the support that I received. First and foremost, my family, but also our community and the people around us.
You mind if we talk about politics for a second?
we can. I don't know how much you're going to get out of me, but we can.
Well, we're in an election year, and the reason I bring it up is because this is something that I discussed with Erica as well. Um, Lupe, I'm curious. In this fall's elections, let's talk about at least locally in Iowa. What are you hoping for in the elections? What do you want to see?
And I'm in Nebraska, so I'm on the side of the river. But we're a small community, so it's pretty much all tied in together. Um, there's been. I want to see, obviously, a little bit more change here within our community.
What does that mean?
Well, when it comes to politics, it's very hard to be political. I believe, at a national level. Um, we're in a couple of small cities that we would hope that change. We want change that impacts the community here where we're at. Obviously, it'd be a dream if what we do here um, would impact the whole nation. But that's a little bit far fetched, I believe. I mean, I want to see more support for immigrants here. Um, have something for immigrants, whether legal or not legal, that we could help here in our community. I think there's a lot. I think we depend a lot on our immigrants in our whole nation, but here where we're living, I would hope that Nebraska or Iowa would be more understanding and put something in place here locally.
When you talk to other Hispanics, other Latinos in the community there, what sort of conversations are there around support for immigrants? What I'm asking there, Lupe, is in your conversations with other people, What have they shared with you in terms of what their experiences have been?
You know, some of them, their experiences have not been the greatest, just because firsthand they have been, subject to a racial bias here in the community. Um, they know that they're a big part of our community. Obviously here, we're surrounded by packing plants, dairy farms, pig farms, etc. And most of our immigrants in those places. They're the ones that are keeping all that here in our community, and they're the ones that are doing the work that we're able to benefit from. So, that being said, that they would appreciate maybe feeling more appreciated here where they're working, um, as towards, some of them don't even have transportation because they're not allowed to get a driver's license, where other states allow them to have a driver's license. I want to say 90% of all these people that are undocumented are hardworking people, honest families that just want to be in the community and follow the rules. But not everybody sees that and sees these immigrants as I just explained.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you think about the way in which we as Americans, what I mean is the way that we perceive when immigrants, when someone that's undocumented comes into the country, that can be perceived in a number of ways. But I'm curious, Lupe, for you, what is the misconception around people coming in that are undocumented citizens? How should we understand that? How are we understanding that now versus how should we see that?
Well, you figure, an example is, in Mexico, you work a week, a whole week of from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m., basically sun up to sundown. How would you like receiving $150 for that whole week with that many hours? How can somebody live like that, right? Especially, we couldn't live off of that here. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
They make that work back in Mexico or any other country for that matter that makes that amount. So you bring some of those people that are hardworking, that are working the fields, agriculture, all the nasty jobs that nobody wants to do here. You bring them here, you pay them, say, $9, $10 an hour, and they're going home with a nice paycheck of $300-$400 a week. What do you think those people are going to do for you? A long time ago, I had a lady make a comment that all these immigrants came here to take our jobs. Well, how do you figure that? First of all, if you would have been doing your job correctly and accurately and really felt passionate about your job, there's nobody that could have came in here and took your jobs. So her response to that, no, but they do labor for cheap. I said, for some reason, us as Americans, we have a bad perception of what work is. We want to do little work but get paid great. And immigrants coming to this country are the opposite. They work a lot harder for a lot less pay. So how are they coming in here taking your jobs? That was my response to that one lady in that comment that she made. So I'm a true believer that nobody can take your job. You lose your own job. Unfortunately, and I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, but an immigrant that's worked all his life since they were 10 years old, come here at a certain age, and they see that for the same amount of work and the same dedication that they showed for years back in their country, they can come here, do the same work, same dedication, and get paid 10 times more than what they were getting paid, what do you think is going to happen? You know?
Yeah. You may have heard that, there are people who say that when folks that are coming from, Mexico, South America, other parts there, that those countries are sending their worst to America. How would you respond to that?
Well, if we just look at statistically, we have the worst here in America. Some Americans are the worst people that we've ever seen in history. So how can you say that, they're sending their worst? Is there people that shouldn't be here that are? Yeah, I agree. I agree. But let's not get confused. We have some of the worst people here in America already.
What do you mean by that, Lupe? I'm just curious. Could you give me a little bit more on that?
The worst people, we have the worst mass killers in America, the mass rapists, the, people that just go out and shoot people just because they want to. So how do you figure that we're getting their worst from other countries? I don't understand that.
If you were to say that if there's a lesson that Americans can learn from immigrants coming from other countries willing to come here to work far harder for less, if there's a lesson to be learned there, what is that lesson, do you think?
Um, do the jobs that all the immigrants come here and do that you don't want to do. Start there.
What's notable in the conversation is the fact that Jose tends to downplay the effects of racism, but you also hear him discussing the negative perceptions that often arise about foreigners. He even makes a point to discuss better pathways to citizenship for undocumented residents. So here again, we face a huge disconnect. There can be a division among immigrants and people of color in America when it comes to matters of race. And what complicates it further is that blacks in America have a shared, understood history, but those coming from other countries are entering midway into the current narrative without that same backstory. There's often no easy way to gloss over this tension. However, it doesn't mean that people of color and immigrants have to avoid working together on facing key issues. And perhaps one of the biggest issues is that of income inequality. While immigrants may take low-wage, undesirable jobs, people of color often share that same struggle. In either case, the real battle is for economic justice. Minorities of every background are highly enterprising, and that's a resource that needs to be tapped for the good of the country. So whether or not we agree on how to deal with the effects of racism, we can choose to focus our efforts on the sort of marketplace opportunities that moves everybody forward. When you think about this upcoming fall election, what do you think folks are hoping for within the region?
Well, the excitement in our region happened when Steve King was defeated in the primary. That's been a huge area of strife, as you can imagine, in the very diverse immigrant-led community. To have him be the representative for Iowa's congressional district in the Sioux City area. So I think that was the relief for a lot of folks. Of course, they don't know what the general is going to look like in that, but I think just
Sure.
even having him out of the picture was helpful for a lot of people. It's interesting. We still have a very strong, among our Hispanic populations, very strong Catholic base, and a lot of people are still single issue voters. I think it really depends on what generation you're talking to and how much that generational influence has spilled over to the next generation. And
when you say a single issue voter, I'm just curious, like what's the issue that you're
abortion.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious. I figured, but sure.
Yeah. No, you're right. Because with some people, the single issue is immigration, and with some it's, healthcare. So, but yeah, when it comes to Catholic Hispanics, a lot of times the issue is abortion. But on the other hand, I have a lot of friends who are Catholic and nuns, as close to a nun as you can get in some cases. But, and it's not that they support abortion, but they recognize there's a whole lot more issues at stake and a whole lot more that a president and your congressional members have to do than just decide about abortion related cases. And so they vote holistically rather than just on a single issue. So it'll be interesting to say the least. I'm sure that Nebraska as a whole will remain as red as it always is. Iowa, you know, I never know. A lot can happen between now and then. I think one of the things that scares a lot of the immigrants in our community and those who work with them is what more can happen and how much worse it can get in a second term, especially where a second term, you know, nobody's trying to run for re-election. I don't think it would matter with this president because he kind of does what he wants regardless of that. But how much more immigrants could be denigrated and affected negatively. But on the other hand, I know a lot of immigrants who voted for him the first time around because they liked his economic ideas and policies, and they weren't concerned. I mean, these are Muslim immigrants, and this was in the middle of a Muslim ban, and they weren't concerned about that because their family is here.
Interesting.
They were concerned about the economic policies and the opportunities for them to move forward. So I'm surprised every day. I can't even speculate because I'm always surprised by what I learn from people, to be honest.
Certainly. Well, Erica, I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, this has been really good.
Enjoy your quiet house for a little longer.
I just heard the kids walk in, so it's over. Oh, well.
Oh, well.
Thanks,
all
Erica.
right, thanks, Ethan.
Take care. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Remember to support our show so we can keep bringing the most unique content featuring the world's realest entrepreneurs. Go to our website, GigRoots.co, where you can find more episodes, give a donation to the show, and stay up to date with the latest news. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more great content. Right now is the time to celebrate marketplace diversity and to support grassroots economics. We'll see you next time.